Right now, in a country most people couldn't find on a map, the world's two superpowers are locked in a silent war that will reshape the next century. Malaysia, a nation of 33 million people sandwiched between the South China Sea and the Indian Ocean, has become the most strategic chess piece in a game where losing means economic extinction. While you are scrolling through your feed, Chinese state banks quietly funneled over $15 billion into Malaysian infrastructure in just the last 3 years. Meanwhile, American semiconductor giants are building billion-dollar factories in Malaysian jungles, racing against a clock that's already run out. This isn't about trade deals or diplomatic handshakes. This is about who controls the arteries of global power, and Malaysia just became the heart. Before we expose how this tiny nation became the epicenter of a technological Cold War, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because what's happening in Kuala Lumpur right now will determine whether your smartphone exists in 5 years, whether your country can defend itself, and whether the world you know survives the decade. The algorithms don't want you to see this, but 90% of you watching aren't subscribed. Change that now, because this story gets darker with every passing second. Section 1. The trap is set. In 2013, something unprecedented happened in the port of Malacca, one of the world's busiest maritime choke points. China didn't invade, it didn't threaten, it simply wrote a check. The China Communications Construction Company invested $1.7 billion into the Malacca Gateway project, a massive port complex marketed as economic opportunity, but engineered as geopolitical control. By 2018, Malaysia's national debt to Chinese lenders exceeded $250 billion, roughly 80% of the country's GDP, according to analyses from the Center for Strategic and International Studies. The playbook was textbook, Belt and Road. Offer loans too good to refuse, fund infrastructure the host country can't afford to maintain, then quietly take ownership when payments fail. Sri Lanka lost its Hambantota port this way in 2017. Pakistan's Gwadar port followed. Malaysia was supposed to be next, except someone noticed the trap before it snapped shut. In May 2018, Malaysia shocked the world. Newly elected Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad canceled $22 billion in Chinese infrastructure projects, calling them unfair and citing concerns about new colonialism. But here's what the headlines missed. Just 6 months earlier, American defense officials held classified meetings with Malaysian intelligence services in Langley, Virginia. Documents later surfaced through investigative journalists at the Wall Street Journal, revealing that U.S. diplomats presented evidence of how Chinese-controlled ports were being retrofitted for dual military use across Southeast Asia. Malaysia wasn't just rejecting debt, it was choosing sides in a war most of its citizens didn't know existed. Beijing's response was surgical. Chinese tourism to Malaysia dropped 23% within a year. Crude palm oil purchases, Malaysia's second largest export to China, mysteriously slowed. And suddenly, Malaysian students found their visa applications to Chinese universities delayed indefinitely. The message was clear. Loyalty isn't optional. Section 2, Silicon Valley's secret exodus. While China tightened its economic noose, America was executing a different strategy, one that would make Malaysia the new Taiwan. In August 2021, Intel announced a $7 billion expansion of its Penang facility, making it the company's largest global assembly and testing site outside the United States. Then came Infineon Technologies' $2 billion investment, followed by Texas Instruments, followed by dozens of shadowy supply chain companies you've never heard of, but whose chips power everything from F-35 fighters to your car's brake system. By 2024, Malaysia had become the world's 7th largest exporter of semiconductors, producing 13% of global chip testing and packaging the invisible backbone of modern civilization. But this wasn't corporate strategy. This was Pentagon contingency planning. When U.S. intelligence agencies wargamed a Chinese invasion of Taiwan, every scenario ended the same way. The collapse of the global semiconductor supply chain and a technological dark age. Malaysia became Plan B. The Chinese Communist Party saw exactly what was happening, and they couldn't allow it. In January 2023, ByteDance, the parent company of TikTok, opened a $1.5 billion data center in Johor, Malaysia's southernmost state, directly across from Singapore. State-owned China Railway Engineering Corporation broke ground on the $11 billion East Coast Rail Link, marketed as trade infrastructure, but designed to move resources and personnel from the South China Sea to the Andaman Sea, bypassing the U.S. Monitored Strait of Malacca. Then came the universities. Xiamen University, Malaysia, the first Chinese university campus in Southeast Asia, graduating thousands of Mandarin-fluent engineers directly into Malaysian tech sectors. According to researchers at the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, at least 17 of these graduates were later connected to companies sanctioned by the US for military technology transfers. Malaysia wasn't just caught between superpowers, it had become the battlefield itself. With every factory, every port, every university, a fortress in a war fought with investments instead of missiles. Section 3. The human flood nobody's talking about. But the real genius of China's strategy isn't infrastructure, it's people. Between 2010 and 2023, Malaysia's Chinese population grew by over 800,000. According to migration data analyzed by the International Organization for Migration, but these aren't ordinary immigrants. They're tech workers, engineers, and executives tied to state-backed enterprises, settling primarily in Penang, Selangor, and Johor, the exact regions where semiconductor and data industries are exploding. The Malaysian government's MM2H, Malaysia My Second Home visa program, designed to attract wealthy retirees, became a Trojan horse. 60% of approved applicants since 2020 have been Chinese nationals, many of whom immediately invested in property near strategic industrial zones. Meanwhile, Western intelligence agencies identified at least 40 shell companies in these regions linked to technology transfer networks. The pattern is unmistakable. China isn't just investing in Malaysia's economy, it's embedding itself into the population, creating facts on the ground that can't be undone with sanctions or tariffs. The United States saw the demographic shift and panicked quietly. In 2022, the U.S. State Department launched the Clean Network Initiative in Malaysia, pressuring telecom providers to remove Huawei 5G equipment and replace it with Ericsson and Nokia infrastructure, a process costing Malaysian companies over $3 billion. Then came the visa leverage. In 2023, the U.S. expanded its global entry program to include Malaysia, fast-tracking business visas for Malaysians working in semiconductor and tech sectors. American universities began offering full scholarships to Malaysian engineering students, but only if they committed to internships at U.S. firms. According to education analysts at the Institute of International Education, Malaysian student enrollment in American STEM programs increased 34% between 2021 and 2023, the highest growth rate in Southeast Asia. This is soft power warfare, shaping the next generation's loyalty before they ever enter the workforce. But here's the terrifying question nobody in Washington or Beijing wants to answer. What happens when Malaysia's 33 million people realize they're not citizens of a country anymore, but hostages in someone else's war? Section 4. The endgame nobody sees coming. September 2024 marked the point of no return. The U.S. and Malaysia signed a defense cooperation agreement that, buried in technical language, allows American military aircraft emergency access to Malaysian air bases, including facilities less than 300 miles from Chinese installations in the disputed Spratly Islands. China's response came within weeks. The People's Liberation Army Navy conducted its largest ever joint exercises with the Royal Malaysian Navy in the South China Sea, with warships passing within 12 nautical miles of American surveillance vessels. Then, both superpowers did something unprecedented. They began building parallel cities. China's Forest City, a $100 billion mega project in Johor, was designed to house 700,000 people, mostly Chinese nationals, in what critics called a colony within a country. Meanwhile, U.S., Tech companies quietly funded the expansion of Penang's Batu Kawan Industrial Park, creating an American-aligned economic zone with its own security, infrastructure, and critically undersea fiber optic cables directly to Guam and Silicon Valley, bypassing Chinese-controlled networks entirely. Malaysia's government knows the endgame. Whichever superpower controls Malaysia's infrastructure, population, and strategic position controls Southeast Asia, and whichever power controls Southeast Asia controls the 21st century. But the costs are already visible. Malaysia's currency, the ringgit, has become one of Asia's most volatile, swinging wildly as investors bet on geopolitical outcomes rather than economic fundamentals. According to World Bank data, foreign direct investment inflows to Malaysia spiked 47% in 2023, but 80% of that came from just two sources, China and the United States, each trying to outspend the other into submission. Malaysian citizens are watching their country transform into a landscape they no longer recognize, their ports owned by foreigners, their tech sector employing people who barely speak Malay, their military conducting exercises for powers that view Malaysia not as a partner, but as territory. And here's the truth that keeps geopolitical analysts awake at night. This isn't a proxy war. This is the war. When historians look back at the fall of the American Empire or the rise of the Chinese century, they won't point to Taiwan or Ukraine. They'll point to a country most people forgot existed, where the future was won or lost in silence, while the world looked away. Malaysia didn't choose to become the battleground. It woke up one morning and found two empires building fortresses in its backyard, and now there's no way out. That doesn't end in someone's victory and someone's subjugation. The only question left is whether Malaysia will still be Malaysia when the dust settles, or just a name on a map controlled by whoever wrote the biggest check. If this story just changed how you see the world, then subscribe right now, because this channel exposes the wars being fought in shadows while the media distracts you with noise. Drop a comment telling me which country you think will control Malaysia by 2030, and if you want to understand how this same strategy is playing out in Africa, Latin America, and even Europe, the next video is already waiting for you. Don't let the algorithm bury this. Watch it now. Claude is AI and can make mistakes. Please double check responses.